The night the siren screamed, everyone thought it was over. The town of Elmswood had seen storms before, but this one felt different. The sky boiled in a bruised shade of violet, lightning splitting through clouds like cracks in old glass. Most people ran for shelter, but she didn't. She stood there in the middle of the street, soaked and trembling, her eyes locked on the factory that everyone else had given up on saving. Her name was Claire Turner, and they had all underestimated her until that night. For months, Claire had been the quiet one at the plant. She was the junior engineer nobody really listened to, the one whose voice got lost in the hum of machines and the chatter of men who thought they knew better. She was fresh out of college, all heart and equations, trying to prove herself in a place that didn't believe in second chances, or in her. Her boss, Hank, called her kid instead of engineer. Her coworkers smiled politely when she spoke in meetings, then went back to doing things the old way. It was easier to ignore her ideas than admit she might be right, but Claire noticed things. The factory's power grid flickered more often than it should. The backup generators were ancient, barely holding together with rust and luck. When she pointed it out, Hank just said, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." So she stopped talking about it, out loud anyway. Instead, she stayed late, studying the schematics, running her own tests, writing notes in a little black notebook that she never let anyone see. Then came the storm. It started with wind, howling, tearing at the trees until branches flew like knives. The rain came next, pounding the roof of the plant so hard it sounded like war drums. By nightfall, the power grid went down across half the county. The factory, which stored thousands of gallons of hazardous chemicals, was running on backup. That was when Claire's stomach dropped. She knew those generators couldn't hold out, not for long. When the first explosion echoed in the distance, a transformer somewhere up the ridge, everyone panicked. The plant manager ordered an evacuation. Workers scrambled for the exits, clutching helmets and shouting over the alarms. But Claire ran the other way. "Toward the control room, Turner." "Get out of there." Hank's voice crackled over the radio, harsh with static. "That's an order." She didn't respond. Her hands shook as she typed in override commands, trying to reroute power from the inactive sections to the cooling system. The generators groaned, lights flickering like candle flames in the wind. For a second it worked. Then the screens went black. The silence that followed was worse than the storm. Claire could feel the heat rising from the reactors below. The coolant pumps had failed. Without power, the chemical tanks would start overheating. The last time something like this happened, back in '89, it wiped out 2 whole neighborhoods. She had read about it. She had promised herself it would never happen again, not on her watch. She sprinted through the corridor, her boots splashing through the rising water. Every door she passed rattled with the force of the storm outside. Somewhere metal screamed, a pipe bursting open. She could smell the chemical burn in the air. Her mind raced. There had to be a way to manually restart the pumps. But it was in the maintenance wing, 3 floors down, half flooded and without power. Most people would have turned back. But Claire wasn't most people. She grabbed a flashlight from the wall rack and headed for the stairwell. The light wavered in her trembling hand, slicing through smoke and steam. Her radio buzzed again. "Claire, damn it, where are you?" Hank's voice was shaking now. "We're pulling out." "The place isn't stable." "Then get everyone clear," she said, breathless. "I'm not leaving." "What the hell do you think you're going to do down there?" "Save the plant," she whispered, but the line was dead. The stairwell was half submerged and the air was thick with heat. She sloshed through the water, one step at a time, her heart pounding in rhythm with the storm outside. Every creak of the metal staircase felt like a countdown. At one point, she nearly slipped, but caught herself on the railing, panting. The light flickered out. Dead battery. In the dark, she could hear the low hiss of steam and the distant rumble of thunder. For a moment, fear gripped her throat. She thought of her mother, who used to tell her she'd never survive in a world like this, that she was too soft, too quiet. "People will walk all over you, Claire," she used to say. "You need to be louder." But Claire didn't want to be louder. She wanted to be right. She found the door to the maintenance wing and forced it open. The control room beyond was lit only by the glow of emergency indicators, dim red lights blinking like tired eyes. She found the manual override lever, but the handle was jammed. The metal was warped from heat. Her palm slipped as she tried to pull it down. It wouldn't budge. That was when she heard a voice behind her. "Turner?" She turned. Hank stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone, flashlight trembling in his hand. He looked older than she'd ever seen him, tired, scared. "You're insane," he said. "The floor's about to give out. We've got to go." She shook her head. "If we leave, the tanks will rupture. The whole valley goes up in flames." He hesitated, glancing at the lever. "You can't move that alone." "Then help me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he dropped his flashlight, stepped forward, and grabbed the other end. Together they pulled. The metal groaned. Nothing. They braced their boots against the floor and pulled again. This time the handle shifted. A few inches, then more. Steam burst from the pipes above, scalding the air. The alarms wailed louder, echoing through the building. Finally, with one last heave, the lever slammed down. The pumps roared to life. For a second, they both just stared, gasping, their faces lit by the blinking green lights of the restart sequence. Then Hank laughed, half shock, half relief. "You actually did it," he said. "You crazy, brilliant—" The floor buckled. There was a deafening crack as the metal platform tore away from the wall. Water rushed in like a wave, sweeping them off their feet. Claire hit the railing hard, pain flaring through her arm. Hank's flashlight spun out of sight. The last thing she saw before the lights went out was the generator room collapsing in a roar of sparks and steam. When she came to, she was lying in the mud outside, rain pounding her face. The factory behind her was burning, but not exploding. She pushed herself up, coughing, every muscle screaming in pain. The others were there. Firefighters, paramedics, plant workers watching as the fire crews moved in. Someone shouted her name and hands grabbed her shoulders, wrapping her in a blanket. She barely heard them. Then Hank stumbled out of the smoke, limping, his face streaked with ash. He saw her and stopped. For a long moment, neither said a word. Then he just nodded. "You saved us," he said quietly. But Claire didn't feel like a hero. She felt hollow, tired, cold, and numb. The sirens still echoed in her ears, and the image of those blinking lights was burned into her mind. The night was far from over. Because as the rain washed over the ruins, she noticed something small, almost hidden among the wreckage. A faint, rhythmic pulse of blue light. It wasn't supposed to be there. Claire's breath caught. That flicker of blue wasn't random. It was coming from the auxiliary control hub buried under the east wing. The hub that was supposed to be sealed years ago. She tried to stand, her legs trembling, mud sucking at her boots. The emergency teams were shouting orders, too busy to notice her moving toward the glow. Every instinct told her to stop, to let someone else handle it. But the part of her that had spent months being ignored, the part that refused to back down, pushed her forward. She waded through the debris, smoke curling around her like ghosts. The blue light blinked faster as she neared the collapsed section of the wall. She crouched, brushing away wet chunks of concrete. Beneath it, she saw a metal hatch partially open, faint steam spilling from the gap. A single word was stenciled on the side: containment. Her pulse quickened. She remembered reading about this in the old files, the secret expansion project that had been abandoned after a chemical leak. They had sealed it off, claiming it was stable. But if the backup systems were still running down there, that meant something was alive, something big enough to draw power on its own. "Claire," Hank's voice cut through the chaos behind her. "What are you doing?" "Get away from there." She ignored him. "There's still something active underground," she shouted back. "If we don't shut it down, this whole place could blow." Before he could respond, she slipped through the hatch. The air inside was heavy and metallic like rust and ozone. Dim lights flickered down a narrow corridor, revealing rows of pipes and control panels coated in grime. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow echoing beats. She pressed forward, clutching the flashlight she'd taken from a fallen fireman. The sound of the storm faded, replaced by a low hum, a vibration she could feel in her chest. The hum grew louder as she reached the main chamber. And when she stepped inside, she froze. The containment unit loomed in the center of the room, massive, cylindrical, and pulsing with blue energy. Cracks spidered across its surface, leaking faint streams of vapor that hissed as they touched the floor. Warning lights blinked in erratic patterns. She read the display on the control panel and her blood ran cold. Core temperature. Critical. Cooling system offline. Structural failure imminent, she whispered. No. No. The manual override switch was snapped clean off. There was no way to shut it down remotely. And from the readings, she guessed they had less than 20 minutes before the containment shell ruptured. The energy inside, it wasn't just chemical. It was experimental. Something designed to power the next generation of industrial plants. Something never tested outside of simulations. Hank's voice crackled on the radio again. "Claire, answer me." She pressed the button. "I found the containment core." "It's unstable." "What do you mean unstable?" "The whole thing's offline." "No," she said softly. "It's alive." For a long moment all she could hear was static. "Then get out." "That's an order." "You don't understand," she said. "If this ruptures, it'll take half the county with it. I can stabilize it, but I need time. You've done enough. The emergency team's moving in. They'll be too late." Her voice was calm now, almost eerily so. The same calm she felt during college finals, during every disaster simulation she'd ever run. The fear was still there, but it had turned into something sharper. Focus. She scanned the schematics on the wall and found the coolant intake valves. If she could reroute the secondary fluid tanks through the old filtration lines, it might cool the core long enough for shutdown. But it would have to be done manually, from inside the containment chamber. She stared at the massive door at the base of the unit. Inside meant radiation, heat, maybe death. Outside meant watching everything burn. She didn't hesitate. Claire dropped the flashlight, grabbed a pair of gloves from the maintenance rack, and keyed in the manual access code. The door hissed open with a blast of steam. The light inside was blinding, the air vibrating with energy. Every step she took felt like walking into a storm made of light. Sparks danced across the walls. Her skin prickled with static. She reached the control module, gripping the release handle with both hands. It wouldn't move. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Come on," she whispered, yanking with all her strength. The metal burned through her gloves. She screamed but didn't let go. Finally, with a thunderous snap, the valve twisted. Blue coolant surged through the pipes, spraying the air with mist. The lights on the core flickered, then dimmed. She slumped against the wall, coughing. The hum was fading. The system was stabilizing. It was working. Then the radio flared. "Claire, the readings are dropping." "What did you do?" She smiled faintly. "Just fixed your plant," she said. A pause. "You're a damn hero, Turner." But she wasn't smiling anymore. The coolant pressure warning was flashing red. One of the intake valves had burst. She could see the gauge spinning out of control. If it hit the limit, the feedback would trigger an implosion. She stumbled toward the exit. The floor was slick, shaking beneath her feet. The door loomed ahead, but before she reached it, the ground split open. A surge of blue fire shot up from below, knocking her back. The shockwave slammed the door shut. She was trapped. Her lungs screamed for air. She crawled to the intercom, slamming the transmit button. "Hank, get everyone back! It's gonna blow." "No!" His voice came back, panicked. "We're pulling you out. Hold on." "Don't. There's no time." Her words broke off as the lights around her began to flicker, the core's glow intensifying. She looked up through the haze and realized something impossible. The energy inside wasn't expanding outward. It was collapsing inward, folding light into itself, like a black hole in miniature, and it was pulling everything toward it. She clung to a pipe as the air roared around her. Tools, debris, even metal panels tore free, spinning into the vortex. She screamed as the suction grew stronger. The last thing she saw before darkness consumed her was the blue light swallowing the room whole. Then, silence. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on her back, surrounded by nothing, no walls, no floor, just soft white light stretching forever. For a moment she thought she was dead. Then she heard a voice, not from outside but from within the light itself. System rebooting, it was mechanical, echoing. She sat up slowly. The light began to shift, forming outlines, machines, pipes, the containment chamber itself. Except it was whole again. Clean. The way it must have looked before the storm. She was inside the core. Her hands shook as she stood. The walls pulsed faintly, responding to her movement. It was like the system was alive, watching her. Then the voice came again. Human presence detected. "Authorization required," she whispered. "I'm Claire Turner. Engineer ID 287K, a pause. Then identity confirmed. Welcome, Claire Turner." Her heart pounded. "What is this place?" "Primary reactor consciousness online," the voice replied. Safety override engaged. "Catastrophic event prevented." She stared at the glowing walls. "You stopped the explosion?" "Affirmative." "Neural interface activated. Your bioelectric signature stabilized containment sequence." It took her a second to understand. The system had connected with her, used her own neural energy to balance the feedback loop. It hadn't just saved the plant. It had saved her, or maybe kept her. Release protocol, she said. Let me out. External environment unstable. Exit denied. No, she shouted. You can't keep me here. But the light only pulsed in reply, soft and steady. The voice was calm, almost gentle. You are safe, Claire Turner. Rest now. Outside, the storm had ended. The plant still stood. Reporters would later call it a miracle, an unexplained phenomenon that stopped a catastrophic meltdown. They would find no trace of Claire, only her notebook floating in the mud, pages soaked but legible. Inside it, the last line read, If they won't listen, I'll show them. Weeks later, Hank stood before the rebuilt core, staring at the soft blue glow within. Sometimes when the lights flickered just right, he thought he saw her, her reflection in the glass smiling faintly, watching, guiding. They had underestimated her. They had dismissed her as too young, too quiet, too idealistic. But when everything fell apart, she didn't just lead the charge, she became the light that saved them all. And somewhere, in the hum of the machines and the whisper of the wind through the wires, her voice seemed to linger, steady, sure, and unbroken, because heroes don't always wear armor or carry titles. Sometimes they're the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who refuse to walk away when everyone else does. And sometimes that's enough to change everything.